Please join me in welcoming Bob Peterson.
Hi, thanks everybody for coming here. My talk tonight is on out-of-body experiences and lucid dreaming and the similarities and the differences between the two. My credentials, why should you be listening to me? Why would anyone listen to me? Well, first of all, I've been studying out-of-body experiences and having my own out-of-body experiences since 1979. That was the year that I read Robert Monroe's first book, Journeys Out of the Body. And I read it very quickly, and I was a very scientific kind of guy. I was very science-oriented at that time, and I still am. I'm a computer guy and very logical thinking, and I'm very skeptical about things. But I thought, I don't believe in Robert Monroe. He's talking about all these wild claims about leaving his body, visiting other worlds. I don't believe a word of it. However, as a scientist, if he's telling the truth, it would change our whole world. It would change science. It would also change religion, too, because, religion teaches one thing, and none of the religious stuff that I had read at that point when I was, 18 years old had anything to do with out-of-body experience. I knew what scientists would say. They'd say I was out of my mind. And religion, they'd say that I was out of my mind, too. So, if it's true, it's a very important thing. So I decided to take a step back and, Robert Monroe in his book basically said, don't take my word for it, try it yourself. And he gave a method of reproducing an out-of-body experience. So I said, okay, I'll give the guy the benefit of the doubt. I'll try his method and I'll see if it works. So I laid down that night and I tried his method and I followed his instructions to the letter. And so, okay, I figured, well, if this doesn't work, I'm on to the next book, on to the next topic. Maybe I'll study, astronomy or something. But much to my surprise, when I tried his method, it did give me immediate results, and that was surprising. Unfortunately, after that point in time, his method stopped working for me, and I'm not entirely sure why. But it did set in motion my interest in the topic of out-of-body experiences. I knew from that moment on that it's something that science doesn't acknowledge and most religions don't acknowledge, and I knew that it was something that had to be studied because of its importance. So anyway, I've been having out-of-body experiences since 1980 was my first out-of-body experience. In addition to that, I've collected a mass of 150 books. Actually, there's more than that on out-of-body experience, and I've read almost all of them. But the trouble is, when I read a lot of these books, I found a lot of misinformation. A lot of people were saying one thing and they'd contradict one another. Like, for example, one book would say, in order to do an out-of-body experience, you have to be in the utmost of health. You've got to be very energetic. The next book would say, no, when you're really sick, you almost fall out of your body, you're very close to an out-of-body experience. So one of them's saying you got to be healthy, the other's saying you got to be sick, and this kind of thing. And when I started having out-of-body experiences, I started finding out a bunch of things that nobody talked about. It's like, okay, this happened to me. Why hasn't that anyone said that in any book? So in 1997, I published my first book, Out-of-Body Experiences, How to Have Them and What to Expect. And basically, it originally started out as a list of things that none of the books told me about, what I had encountered and what people can expect out of the experience. And then as soon as the book, even before the book was published, I put the entire text on my website for free. I went to my publisher and I said, hey guys, would you guys mind if I put my entire book on the internet for free? Well, this was way back in 1996. The internet was still pretty new. Not a lot of people knew it. And so they didn't know, they don't know the difference. And besides, I own the copyright. And so they said, well, we can't object. And so I did. And what I found out is that instead of detracting from sales or whatever, it actually helped increase sales. Now, instead of talking to the few people who could go to a bookstore and happen to run into my book, I was able to send my message of out-of-body experiences all over the world. I had people in villages in Africa and India reading it and everything, and I was able to get the information out. And I've only found that it has helped and increased sales. Other authors think I'm crazy. They say, how can you afford to give your book away for free? Well, it's only helped my sales. And plus, I believe that, the universe will provide or whatever. As soon as the book was published in 1997, I took a look at it, was thumbing through it, and it occurred to me all those things that I left out, that all the things that I didn't say that I should have. And so in 2001, I published my second book, Lessons Out of the Body. And that is, the very first book is more on a scientific approach. This is what I experienced. This is what I found out. This is how you can do it. This is what I know. The second book is more geared toward the spirituality of it, where it's led me spiritually. Okay, this is my OBE library. I just thought I'd throw a thing in there. If you look at it, these are all books on out-of-body experience, except for the lower right-hand corner. You can see a couple of books, like Charles Tart's famous book, Altered States of Consciousness. But aside from those, they're all out-of-body books. That does not include books on lucid dreaming. It does not include books on near-death experience. It does not include any of the other topics that are similar. That's just out-of-body. And by the way, when that photo was taken, I had a stack probably about the same size, about this tall, of books that I had queued for reading that were out-of-body books. And I've acquired a few more since then, so my library keeps growing. Next, please. Okay, so why is it important to distinguish between out-of-body experience and lucid dreaming? Well, most importantly, I know what I would have said before I had my first out-of-body experience, before I read Robert Monroe's book. I would have said, you're flying out of your body, that's nonsense, you were dreaming. But, it was more real than a dream. No, you were dreaming, it's nonsense. Maybe it was a lucid dream, maybe you were awake. So anyway, it's important to know whether the difference between out-of-body and lucid dream, because you want to know if you're hallucinating or if you're having a perception of some kind. And we want to trust our perceptions. And that's the same reason that I don't partake in hallucinogens, and I've never tried ayahuasca or anything like that, because I want to be able to trust my perceptions. Because in a hallucination, anything can happen, right? I mean, the Minnesota Vikings could win the Super Bowl, for example, or pink elephants could fly, in your bedroom. But anyway, we want to be able to trust that if you see something, are you really seeing it or are you hallucinating? Okay, there are scientific implications to the topic as well. The most important question is, did we really see X? We're out of our body, we're seeing something. Did we really see that? What relationship does the out-of-body world have to this physical world that we're in? Is it all in the brain? And scientifically, if it can be proven that something does leave the body, whatever, what can it tell us about quantum entanglement and telepathy and all these kind of things that science acknowledges right now, but they don't quite understand? There are also implications for our mortality. You're in an out-of-body experience, whatever. You see your mom or dad. Was it really them? You want to believe that the person who's passed over, a loved one, has survived their death. And so the question is, are you hallucinating that person or is it really them? And that also has a implication for our own mortality. Will we survive physical death? And it has moral implications as well. Some people have claimed that they've had sex in the astral world. And the question is, was it really just fantasy? Was it some kind of meaningless wet dream or whatever? Or were you cheating on your spouse? If it's a hallucination, maybe it doesn't have as much meaning. If, on the other hand, it's a real event on an astral world, maybe there are implications. Maybe you're cheating on your spouse. And lastly, there are religious implications. There are stories in many religions about out-of-body experience, although a lot of times they're hidden or worded differently, so we don't look at them that way. But for example, in the Bible, it talks about Enoch, the man who walked with God. And what a lot of people don't know is that Enoch is mentioned in the Bible, but originally there was a book of Enoch that was pulled out of the Bible, and you can find copies of it. It survived in some ancient texts, and you can read that, some of the Apocrypha and Nag Hammadi libraries, that kind of thing. Enoch supposedly had out-of-body experiences. And then St. Paul has a famous quote, 2 Corinthians 12, verses 2 through 4. St. Paul basically said, and I'm paraphrasing here, I know a man who 14 years ago, whether in the body or out of the body, I do not know, only God knows. And when he was there, he got caught up as far as the third heaven, and he heard words that were so secret they can't be repeated. And so basically that is St. Paul, in his own words there, is confirming or affirming that spiritual men or Christians can use out-of-body travel to have spiritual experiences. It's part of the Christian literature. And yet if you talk to people in Christianity, they'll say, no, this is the work of the devil. So I personally believe that the book of Revelations is all one big out-of-body experience. If you read toward the beginning of Revelation of John, he starts out by saying, I was caught up in spirit, and I looked behind me and saw two angels, whatever. But this whole idea of being caught up in the spirit, and then I saw this, and then I saw that, that to me says out-of-body experience. And the religious implications are, were they hallucinations? If they're hallucinations, that throws the whole Bible out, right? Or whatever. That disrupts people's belief system. Were they out-of-body experiences? Or were they lucid dreams? Or what exactly are they? So it's important to know the difference. Okay, so typical question. A lot of times after the publication of my first book, I have people sending me emails and talking to me, and they say, well, X, Y, and Z happened. What was that? What was it, an OBE? Was it a lucid dream, or was it something else? Whatever. And they would try to get me to tell them what it was, because they don't understand what's happening to them. And the bottom line is, since I wasn't there, I can't tell you. But hopefully some of these things that I say tonight will maybe help people sort that out. Okay, to make matters worse, when you say, okay, well, this was an astral projection, or this was a lucid projection, whatever, to make things more complicated, there's a lot of confusing terminology out there, right? There's astral travel, and that presupposes that something is actually traveling out of body, that there's an astral world, and a lot of people make a differentiation that an out-of-body experience, so you're in your bedroom, and if you're out of your bedroom or whatever, you're on a higher plane, then you're astral projecting. So that's a distinction that they make. Another common word is lucid projection, and that's used by the IAC, the International Academy of Consciousness, and the IIPC. And this is an organization that started in Brazil, and they teach out-of-body travel. And I think somebody said the other day that they actually have a branch here in Austin. Lucid projection, I think the IAC came up with a bunch of their own terminology because they felt trapped by the old occult terminology, like astral projection has a lot of connotations, and that might not be very conducive to scientific study, whatever, because it presupposes that it's making assumptions something is actually projecting. And then you've got terms like soul travel used by Albert Taylor and Eckankar, and they're claiming once again that there's a soul and that it travels and all of that. Then there's the Monroe Institute, like Mike's group, and they have what they call focus levels, and that's a little bit different from out-of-body experience, right? Because in a focus level, as I understand it, you can be actually seeing, and what you're seeing is another distant location, for example, but you're not perceiving out-of-body exactly. So there's somebody at the Monroe Institute might beg to differ, but there were a few books written a while back by some of the Monroe Institute professionals like Bruce Moen, Rosalind McKnight, and they talk about different experiences that they have. They call them out-of-body experiences, and yet they're talking about writing down or articulating what's happening. Now I'm here, now I'm there. Their body is moving. They're describing what's happening to them, and to me that isn't quite the same thing. And I'll clarify that in a minute. Then there's near-death experience. People want to know what's the difference between a near-death experience and an out-of-body experience. Well, a near-death experience has a certain number of features, and out-of-body experience is just one of them. So you can have a bunch of features of a near-death experience that don't necessarily translate into an out-of-body experience. For example, people having near-death experiences quite often describe having their life flash before their eyes, and that kind of thing is typically not found in an out-of-body experience. So there's also confusing terminology in psychology and psychiatry, terms like depersonalization, right? Where you're, for example, you're in a car accident and it seems, for example, like you're not actually doing the acting, right? It seems like your body is doing something different from you. And so that's kind of a weird thing. And then, of course, there's out-of-body experience, which I think has the fewest connotations that I like to use. So how do I define an out-of-body experience? The way I define it is I define it as an experience in which your entire consciousness seems to be separated from your physical body. In other words, your physical body is just another inanimate object in the room or bedroom or wherever it happens to be. And I might add that parapsychologist Susan Blackmore made an interesting distinction. The experience of being out of body doesn't mean that you are out of body, right? It's just something that we can say, we had the experience, this is what seemed to have happened. Now, that doesn't mean that something actually left your body, maybe your perceptions moved, whatever. But anyway, that's something that science still needs to answer. Okay, so the question of whether or not lucid dreams and out-of-body experience are the same thing first came up back in the 1990s. I read Stephen LaBerge's book. It's a very good book called Lucid Dreaming, and I highly recommend it. But in that book, LaBerge says, and I quote, I propose that OBEs are actually variant interpretations of lucid dreams, that dream telepathy will provide the basis for an explanation of the occasional accuracy of paranormal OBE vision. Okay, so as soon as I read that, it kind of got my hackles up. It's like, wait a minute, you're telling me that all my out-of-body experiences have been, variant form of lucid dreams. So I published an online article, and it was basically comparing out-of-body experience to lucid dreams. And basically, I got into an online fight with the Lucidity Institute in 1995. And their argument basically was, we produced lucid dreams in our lab, and they share many of the characteristics of out-of-body experiences. Therefore, OBEs are a type of lucid dream. I said, okay, well, my argument is, no matter how many PCs you find, you can't legitimately say that a Mac is a PC, right? You go to any business office, you find a computer, right? Oh, this one's got a keyboard. This one's got a screen. It's got some USB ports. It's got a hard drive. Well, they might have a lot of similarities, but you can't claim that a Mac is a PC. So they also have differences. Okay, so their argument, they went on to say something like, and I'm not, resurrecting the argument really, I'm paraphrasing. They said basically, well, OBEs are poor quality lucid dreams because you don't even realize you're dreaming. You're so dim-witted or whatever, you don't even realize you're dreaming, you're a fool. I retorted and I said, well, lucid dreams are poor quality OBEs because you're sitting there and you're watching this hallucination in front of your eyes called a dream, and you don't even realize you're out of your body. So anyway, they came back and they said, well, yeah, but lucid dreamers know they're dreaming. And I said, well, OBEers know they're not dreaming. So anyway, the argument was settled when I wrote to him and I said, okay, look, my wife and I happen to be going to California in a month. We'll be traveling in that area. How about I fly down there and drive to your Lucidity Institute? You can hook me up to your machines, put me on some brainwave monitors, and I'll reproduce an out-of-body experience in your lab. And they hemmed and hawed and, well, gee, you know, it's not really a good time. We got other, nah, we can't do that. So, okay, well, I guess they're not very interested in finding out the truth. I was willing to do it. So fast forward a few years. Just a few years ago, scientist Olaf Blanc and later Michael Persinger came out and they did some medical experiments, and they determined that electronically stimulating the right temporal parietal junction of the brain caused disorientation, floating sensations, and it affected a subject's perception of their body position. And basically, it's about here. It's above the right ear. The diagram shows it's circled, but that's the wrong side of the brain. This is circled. It's this side. So everyone right away, when they read this article, jumped on the bandwagon. Oh boy, this proves that out-of-body experiences are a hallucination. And even it went so far as the New York Times wrote an article called "Your Brain is to Blame." And I like out-of-body author Graham Nichols. He has a quote in his book, Navigating the Out-of-Body Experience. His quote said, "Yet a simple review of his work reveals that he, Olaf Blanc, is one of the key scientists relying upon the logical fallacy that producing a hallucination or illusion disproves something about the object of the hallucination or illusion. In other words, you can't prove Martian soil is fake, no matter how many faked Photoshop images you produce of it," right? And if you look at the background on that slide, that's a picture of Mars. And the bottom line is nobody has touched the surface of Mars or experienced it directly with their physical senses, and yet there's a overwhelming prevalent scientific belief that Mars does exist. So anyway, what is the difference? Well, let's take a look. The difference between lucid dreaming and out-of-body experience. What do the professionals say? I'm not a professional psychologist or psychiatrist, but in the 1980s, there were a couple of professional psychiatrists. Dr. Glenn Gabbard, MD, professional psychiatrist. Dr. Stuart Twemlow, MD, professional psychiatrist. They studied the differences between out-of-body experience and a whole bunch of different phenomena. And they, for example, studied it. They compared it to lucid dreaming, among other things, autoscopy, schizophrenia, depersonalization, and other body boundary disturbances. And their conclusion was that out-of-body experience did not fit into any category. It is its own category. In other words, they broke it down and had an in-depth discussion in terms of psychiatry and psychology of why an out-of-body experience is different. And one of the things they compared it against lucid dreaming. So they had a table in their book. They have a chapter dedicated to lucid dreaming versus out-of-body. And in that book, they have a table, and I didn't reproduce the table exactly, but I abbreviated some things and kind of reduced it down a little bit. But basically, what they found is that lucid dreaming occurs in 50 to 70% incidence in the general population, whereas out-of-body experience is reported by about 14 to 25% of the general population. Lucid dreaming occurs only during sleep. Out-of-body occurs usually when you're awake. In a lucid dream, dreamers can consciously program the dream. In an out-of-body, the OBEer is typically a passive, objective observer. In a lucid dream, the dreamer and the physical body are integrated. In other words, when you're a lucid dreamer, you know your body's in bed, you know you're there or whatever, but you're comfortable that your body is elsewhere. You know that it's there. In an OBE, you perceive your body as separate from you. Also, in a lucid dream, and this is a very interesting one, your consciousness is often vivid, very vivid, sometimes having mystical qualities. And in an out-of-body experience, your consciousness is usually more ordinary. It's more like being awake. In a lucid dream, you can have these wild, ecstatic experiences, whatever, and just in intensity, whatever. And in an out-of-body experience, it's typically not like that. It's typically more like being awake. Next slide. Okay, more differences by Gabbard and Twemlow. The dream is seen as personal, subjective, whereas an out-of-body experiencer sees it as an objective thing. In a lucid dream, EEG readings typically show REM sleep with occasional alpha brain waves. In an OBE, there are no typical brain waves on the EEG. Charles Tart studied some out-of-body folks, including Robert Monroe, and what he found is some theta waves and kind of inconclusive results, but typically not REM sleep. In a lucid dream, your physical body typically is not visible. In an out-of-body experience, your physical body is a lot of times visible. You look behind, you see your body is lying there in bed, or at least the bed with an indentation on it in the shape of your body, or a gray mass where your body should be, that kind of thing. Also, in a lucid dream, fewer have lasting positive impact. In an OBE, they usually have a highly positive lasting impact. Now, a lot of these things, the Lucidity Institute was quick in pointing out, and rightly so, that a lot of those things are subjective, right? If you are having this experience and you interpret it as a lucid dream, maybe you're less likely to have it make an impact on you than if you were to interpret it as an out-of-body experience, right? So a lot of these things are your interpretation. You think you're separate from your body. They don't. It doesn't prove a lot. Fast forward to Robert Wagner, who I hear is going to be a guest coming up. Excellent guy. He wrote an excellent book called Lucid Dreaming, Gateway to the Mind. And I just got through reading it. A fantastic book. I highly recommend it. But even Robert Wagner was quick to point out in the very beginning of his book that lucid dreams and OBEs are two different things. In a lucid, and he has a table similarly. Actually, it's not a table. He describes the differences as he sees them. And the things he described, I condensed into this table. Lucid dreams are typically instigated while dreaming, whereas OBEs are at the juncture between awakening and asleep. And that's also something that Gabbard and Twemlow said as well. Lucid dreaming is not ever initiated by trauma. So you're in a car accident or something like that, you don't start having a lucid dream. However, there have been a lot of cases reported where out-of-body experiences have occurred because of trauma, because of anesthesia, because of other psychological trauma, like the cases of rape, things like that. Also, in a lucid dream, as Robert Wagner points out, there's typically no buzzing, electricity, energy, vibrations, that kind of thing. And in an out-of-body experience, a lot of times there is. In a lucid dream, you can consciously change your environment. So the example I always like to mention is I had a lucid dream once where I was in a hospital. I realized I was dreaming, and boy, this is great. I'm in a lucid dream. This is the hospital. I'm going to make a wall, I feel like flying. I'm going to make a tunnel appear where that wall is right now, and I physically created a tunnel. I was able to do that with an act of will and buzz through that, but I knew it was a hallucination the whole time. In an out-of-body experience, typically your environment is more stable. You want something to happen, it's not typically going to happen unless, it just doesn't. Now, there are exceptions to all of these rules, and we'll go into that a little bit later. Also, in a lucid dream, your memory often fades. You wake up, you know it was a dream. If you don't write that dream down right away, it tends to fade from view. But a lot of times when you have an out-of-body experience, you come to, Your memory remains clear. You remember, oh my God, this happened, write down this, or whatever. But you'll remember that a lot of times. A lot of people have been able to describe out-of-body experiences years after they've occurred without having written anything down. Also in lucid dreaming, the experiencer typically wakes up. So they have an experience of their body waking up. In an out-of-body experience, it's typically described as returning to your body. And in a lucid dream, you have a lot of times you have false awakenings. So you'll wake up and you'll go about your day, you'll start getting ready for work, and then you'll realize that you're still dreaming. And in fact, you didn't wake up. And so you wake up again. And this can happen 3-4 times. And and some people actually start to worry, am I really going to make it back this time? In an out-of-body experience, that typically does not happen. There aren't false awakenings. Okay, and in my 2001 book, Lessons Out of the Body, I dedicated a chapter to the topic of lucid dreaming versus OBE. And I pointed out some of my own differences that I had noted. In a lucid dream, typically you're not in your bedroom. And in an OBE, you typically are. You start out in your bedroom, and then you can go somewhere else. In a lucid dream, typically there's a lot of sexual content. And when you do have lucid dream sex or whatever, it's convincingly real. Lucid dreamer and author Patricia Garfield noted that, quote, fully 2/3 of her experiences had sexual content. In an OBE, it's not that way. Sexual content in an out-of-body experience is very rare. And when you do have an experience that could remotely be called that, it's nothing like physical sex. Often people describe it as a melting together of souls or an energy exchange or something, but it's nothing like physical sex. Also, lucid dreams are not known to spontaneously occur from a waking state. You don't just suddenly, you're walking down the street and you suddenly have a spontaneous lucid dream. I've never heard of that happening in all my studies. On the other hand, people having out-of-body experiences have had experiences where they suddenly, for no known reason, have fallen out of their bodies. It actually happened to me once when I was in college. I was sitting at my desk waiting for the professor to appear. I was fully conscious, lucid. I was, wide awake, eyes open, and all of a sudden, boom, I was in an out-of-body state. And I kind of floating like this, and all of a sudden, boom, pop back in my body. And that's pretty weird. But it typically does not happen in a lucid dream. There have been other reports out there of people walking down the street, and suddenly they experience an out-of-body experience, and they seem like they're, 15 feet up in the air, or 5 meters up in the air, and they see their own body walking down there, and their body continues to walk, but they're out of it. And then eventually they come back in. More things to consider. Body image. In a lucid dream, you typically have a fully integrated body. You've got a dream body. It looks pretty much like your regular body. In an out-of-body experience, it's more like having a body on demand. I like to call it Schrodinger's body, because it's a body that, the theory of Schrodinger's cat, right? You send a cat out into space, whatever, and that cat may or may not exist because it's in an indeterminate state. It's like that with an out-of-body experience. Your body, astral body, is in an indeterminate state. So if I look for my hands, I expect them to be there. They'll be there. I'll look at them. I'll see them. They look normal. If I'm not thinking about my hands, they're not there. It's like they're completely gone. Same with your legs, whatever. And in fact, a lot of people in out-of-body experiences report having a strange or altered body image. They'll have their awareness will be like a complete sphere. It's like I'm not in an astral body that looks anything like my normal body. I'm actually like a beach ball or a volleyball bouncing around, whatever. You're in a spherical shape. Also, physical eyesight. When you're in a lucid dream, you can look at a room, you can see every detail. And as a matter of fact, you can see details extremely well. In a lucid dream, people have noticed they'll look at a wall, they'll look at a concrete wall, and they'll notice every little tiny dot in that concrete wall, every blemish, every scratch in the countertop surface, whatever, in a lucid dream. In an out-of-body experience, your eyesight is typically not that good. And as in my first book, Out-of-Body Experiences, I mentioned 4 different kinds of eyesight. The predominant eyesight is what I call astral eyesight, and that's kind of weird to describe. It's kind of like you can sense where everything is. You could easily negotiate a room, and yet you're not physically seeing it. If you focus on using your astral eyes, whatever, you'll be able to see things, and it'll be more translatable into human, into your physical terms or whatever. But your eyesight is definitely different. So the 4 kinds of eyesight are astral sight, body sight, and what I describe by body sight is something else that nobody mentioned in their books. I would fly away from the body, whatever. I would try to open my eyes, and what I would see was the ceiling of my bedroom, for example. It was as if my physical eyes had opened, and I was seeing from the body's perspective, and that's very disoriented. So I would close my eyes and whatever, try to focus elsewhere. Mind sensing, again, you can sense where everything is, but it's kind of, it's not like a lot of seeing, not like physical sight. And clairvoyance is kind of similar. And again, the book goes into more details. I don't want to get too bogged down in the details. In a lucid dream, then, people are typically able to fly easily. It's a breeze. You can fly wherever you want, and it's very easy. In out-of-body experiences, I've had a great deal of difficulty flying. Were those my own limitations, my own beliefs? Maybe. But anyway, that's what I've noticed, is it seems a lot more difficult to get around. Also, in a lucid dream, things just seem to happen. As in any dream, there's a stream of events that just keeps happening. It flies by you. This happens, this happens, this happens, and events play out in your dream. In an out-of-body experience, it's not like that. Boredom is definitely an option. The example I like to use here is I once had an out-of-body experience in 1986 where I decided what I would do as an experiment is try to fly to the sun. And so I shot up into space out of body, and I flew off into space, and I just kept flying as fast as I could. Faster, whatever. After 3 minutes, I was bored. It was like, okay, space is going by, nothing's happening. I'm bored. I'm bored out of my mind. That something should be happening. Okay, so that typically doesn't happen in a lucid dream. By the way, I eventually gave up on that and returned to my body. And after I returned to my body, I did some calculations, and I found out that the sun is actually like 300 million miles away. And if you were to travel at the speed of light, it would still take you like 7 or 8 minutes to get to the sun. So I wasn't even halfway there. And in fact, lucid dreams, another difference, dreamer usually needs movement for stability. And one thing that lucid dreamers typically do when they feel like their dream is ending or they're losing cohesion is they start moving. They'll do work, they'll spin, or they'll do something like that. They'll just spin themselves or whatever to try and keep the dream going. In an out-of-body experience, you don't need movement to keep going. Next. I think I already talked about the realistic scenery in lucid dreams. In a typical out-of-body experience, you'll see anomalous things, right? If I were to have an out-of-body experience and visit this room, I might see clouds hanging in midair. I mean, little tiny, puffs of energy, whatever, like cotton balls sitting around. But anyway, you don't get that same crystal clear scenery that you do in a lucid dream. Also, in a lucid dream, your thinking is mostly integrated and clear. You can logically think, okay, well, what if I try this experiment or whatever? What's going to happen here? Robert Wagner did some interesting experiments where he would, for example, find a door and open the door with absolutely no expectations. And if you have no expectations, your subconscious mind has to do something to create that room and the contents thereof, right? In an out-of-body experience, that doesn't always happen. What I noted in my first book, this strange phenomenon that happened to me once, a strange deal with the left brain and right brain. Scientists often claim, at least if you're right-handed, that your left brain is the more analytical side and the right brain is more emotional side. And one time I was out of body and I was in my bedroom and I was going to go off and do something, but I saw something strange that I couldn't identify in my room. And it's like, it almost seemed like there was a white head sitting, floating in midair. And it was had a square bottom, kind of an angular chin, and the hair looked like kind of some spiky green hair coming out, whatever. And I couldn't figure out what the hell it was. So I took a step back and I said, well, okay, I'm going to do an experiment here. And I started doing mathematical calculations to engage the left side of my brain. I started doing math. I started, 2 plus 2 is 4, 8, 16, 32, 64, 128, 256. And I started calculating and doing all these things, square root of 2 and all of this. And as I engaged the left side of my brain, the more analytical side, that object came into crystal clear focus. And what I saw is that it was a plant. I had an aloe vera plant, and that plant was in a round, it was in a kind of a strange shaped vase. It was white, so I saw the color white properly with the right side of my brain. It looked square at the bottom, so I saw the square shape with the right side of my brain. And the hair was the aloe vera plant, sticking out of the vase. But with my right brain engaged, I couldn't determine what that was. It looked like a face. With the left side of my brain engaged, I could clearly see that it was an aloe vera plant. And that's, that's what that solves that mystery, and I went on my way. Also, in a lucid dream, there's typically nobody reports seeing a silver cord. And in an out-of-body experience, a lot of times people do mention a silver cord. Right, that comes from in the Bible. There's the book of Ecclesiastes. It talks about death, and it says, if ever the silver cord be loosed, then you're going to die or whatever. But it refers to death in terms of, you basically breaking the silver cord. And so that's kind of there's a whole set of myth and lore that's built up around it. And yet, as hard as some people look, some people have never seen their silver cord. Other people have. I've seen my silver cord several times, and sometimes it doesn't seem to be there. And I think maybe it's primarily a psychological device. Also, in a lucid dream, there are typically no alternate physical realities. And let me explain that. In an out-of-body experience, sometimes people have noted all other physical realities. Robert Monroe, I think, was the first one I read, where he claimed he had an out-of-body experience, and he went off and he found himself in another physical world, and it seemed to him like he was in this other world for weeks. He inhabited a different person's physical body. He had a physical wife. He came to and assumed this person's identity. Gives you a new appreciation for identity theft. But he assumed this guy's life, and his wife thought he was crazy in this other world, like, you're not like my husband and all of this. But, it seemed like he was gone a long time. And it seemed, by Monroe's description, it seemed very physical. Since that time, I've encountered at least 2 other cases on the internet of people who have claimed to have out-of-body experience in which they've found themselves in another physical reality and spent considerable time, like 2 years and that kind of thing, in somebody else's life. And when they come back to their physical body, it's, only moments may have passed. Okay, I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about some of the similarities between out-of-body and lucid dream. Both of them have mystical experiences occur. Both of them, you're floating and flying. Sometimes your observations match waking reality, although that's very rare for both. Meeting dead relatives. Robert Wagner in his book talked about meeting dead relatives, and I guess that's happened several times. And one of the things that he's done is tried to gather a bunch of evidence to try to establish that this is really the dead person rather than just a hallucination, by getting the dead person to tell them something they didn't know about their lives, that kind of thing, and then going back to a relative or whatever and saying, well, you know, I had this experience and they said this or whatever, and then the person breaks down in tears or whatever, and okay, you know. But that is similar between the two. Also, walking through walls. Also in a lucid dream, lucid dreamers, when they try to interact with people that are in the body, the non-lucid people they interact with appear somehow drunk or odd, definitely not themselves. I've noticed that too. A typical person, if you try and talk to their, you go to your brother's house or whatever, and you walk up to his bed when they're sleeping or whatever, and you try to talk to them, or if they're in their workplace, whatever, and you try to talk to them, they act distracted, they act drunk, or they act like you're talking to their subconscious, but definitely not like they're conscious or whatever, or aware of you consciously. Lucid dreams and OBEs, people typically can push their hands through walls and windows, that kind of thing. Another thing that I noted is common is something that I call the fantasy trap. This is another thing that I've documented in my first book that other out-of-body books don't seem to talk about, and that is if you're having an experience and you start daydreaming at all, like, gee, that'd be pretty cool. I wonder what would happen. I could go visit this. And anyway, if you get wrapped up in any kind of daydream, you can get sucked back into the dream world. You can have the complete experience implode on itself and find yourself in a dream world. And that's what I call the fantasy trap. Both lucid dreams and OBEs are fully conscious experiences, and both have noticed tunnels at times. So anyway, it's my firm belief that most cases, if not all cases, of reported alien abduction are actually out-of-body experiences where the experiencer doesn't understand what's happening to them, or maybe there is really an alien. My belief is there is intelligent life on other planets. The odds are astronomical. There are billions of galaxies, and each of those galaxies have billions of stars, and each of the stars have planets, whatever. The odds are overwhelming that there has to be life on other planets. The only question is whether or not the technology exists for them to come here. Now, to me, it seems a lot easier that somebody from another world would travel here out of body than in the body. So I think maybe these alien abduction experiences, maybe there are aliens involved, maybe they're pulling people out of their bodies for whatever reason and doing whatever experiments. But anyhow, I think it's OBE related, and I have a lot of evidence to back me up. Okay, so continuing on with our examination of OBEs versus lucid dreams, I want to, when we start talking about OBEs and lucid dreams, when we're going to compare the two, what actually is happening when these experiences happen, we have to get to the bottom of the experience. And the first thing I'd like to suggest is that we dissociate from our bodies during sleep. Now, almost every out-of-body author agrees that when we sleep, we leave our bodies. We go into an out-of-body state. But normally, we're not aware of it. We're not aware that it's happening because we're not conscious, right? We're unconscious. And how do I know that? I know that because I've seen it firsthand. And what you got to understand is that I've spent, while other people were out, flying, their astral body to the French Riviera or whatever, I spent hour after hour after hour just reproducing the experience, leaving the body, coming back, studying the boundary between the two, studying, how it works, and all of those things, the mechanics. Okay, so why do we dissociate from our bodies when we sleep? Veteran out-of-body experiencer and author Sylvan Muldoon, in his book from like 1920s, 1924 or whatever, he speculated that the purpose was to recharge the astral body. It's kind of like your cell phone, right? You plug it in at night, and he thought that when you go to sleep, you're plugging your astral body in, and you when the green light comes on, your astral body's fully charged, and people with an excessive amount of energy can actually unplug at that time and leave their body and go off and do astral things or whatever. But most people are just stuck there recharging because they've used all of their energy, and it takes them all night to recharge their astral body. Recent research in science has suggested that maybe the brain cleans itself out during sleep, and perhaps it's easier for this brain cleaning to occur without the extra noise of your consciousness or your awareness sitting there associated in the body. So maybe your body is dissociating so that the physical body can do this work of cleaning the brain. And the question is, what are we doing when this happens? Typically, we're floating just above our bodies, watching hallucinations. So almost every night we're doing it. We're going to sleep. We pop out of our body. We're floating, a few, 3-4 inches above our body, and we're sitting there watching the hallucinations. And a lot of people think that that the purpose of sleep is to basically calm down the mind, let it get some rest, right? Let your brain get some rest. Well, nothing could be further from the truth, because science knows that when we're sleeping, your brain is a firestorm of activity. It's not resting at all. It's like going crazy, right, with activity. So, that's not it. So, okay, so when we consider out-of-body experience versus lucid dreaming, there's a couple of factors that I believe are involved here. The first factor is conscious versus unconscious, right? This circle represents the realm of out-of-body human experience, right? So if you're unconscious, you're not aware of anything that's happening. And when you're conscious, you are aware of what's going on. You're suddenly here, you're present, you're witnessing. The second factor is that it's subjective world versus an objective world, right? Is your experience hallucinated or is it real? If it's hallucinated, it's subjective. It's only happening to you and no one else. If it's objective, then it's real. Now, when I say real, I'm not saying that it has anything to do with this physical world. I'm just saying that it's another non-physical world or whatever. It seems like a real place. It's an objective reality. Okay, then, as I define them, the 4 out-of-body states, and remember that was the intro slide, the very first slide, I called this talk the 4 out-of-body states. Going from lower left clockwise, if you're unconscious and you're witnessing a subjective reality, you're hallucinating, then I call that a normal dream. That's a normal dream that everyone has every night, whether or not you remember them or are aware of them. They happen every night, and that's the state you're in. You're unconscious and you're watching a dream. If you become conscious, then you are watching, you're conscious, but you're still watching a hallucinated environment, right? It's still subjective. I call that a lucid dream. Working your way clockwise, if you are conscious in out of body and you are watching an objective reality, then I call that an out of body experience. And last but not least, if you continue around the circle, if you are unconscious but you're watching an objective reality, then that's what they call shared dreaming. This is the kind of dream that author Robert Moss talked about. He describes all these experiences, and there have been other books as well, where two dreamers, I had a funny dream last night. I was standing on the Golden Gate Bridge, and there was George there. And you were there too, Frank. Well, gee, that's funny. Frank says, I had the same dream. I was also standing on the Golden Gate Bridge. And I remember you said, well, yeah, I did say that, So it's a shared thing, and yet both parties knew they were dreaming. They came back to their body. They were not conscious at the time, but they had this shared dreaming experience, and that's much less common in the literature. Okay, so now actually the slide is the previous slide was kind of misleading because it's really a sliding scale, right? There's no black and white. There are no dividing lines. There are various degrees of lucidity. Anyone who's seen me at 6 o'clock in the morning will testify that I can be very not lucid, even when I'm in my physical body. And so there are varying degrees of lucidity. And there are also varying degrees of perception, right? And that's because the brain has noise filters. This is something that the brain does purposely, and we train ourselves to do that. The noise filters have a very important purpose. They keep things compartmentalized. A good example of this is people who live by train tracks, right? They sleep right through. Train goes by, 10 feet from their house. They don't even notice it. It becomes, they don't even become aware of it. Their brain has learned to ignore that noise, that extraneous noise. And so the brain filters have adjusted themselves. Likewise with people who live in the city, they have their windows open, whatever traffic, automobile noises don't bother them. It's not something they perceive. It's something their brain filters out. People in the country, if they travel to the city, the noise might keep them awake because they don't have that same filter. And vice versa, it works the other way too. If you're used to that noise, the quietness of the country can drive you crazy. So anyway, the fact that it's a sliding scale is more accurately depicted on this diagram, where I show, down below is more representative of muddy degrees of consciousness or unconsciousness, and at the top, very clear lucidity. And both OBEs and lucid dreams can have that lucidity. Next slide. And then this slide here talks about the degrees of objectivity, right? So on the very left-hand side is where you're completely hallucinating. Everything is subjective. And on the right-hand side, you have a very clear level of objectivity. You're experiencing everything in all its reality. And if you overlay the two experiences, what you get is a diagram that looks kind of like this, where you have a mixture of subjectivity and objectivity and conscious and unconscious, and they kind of intersect. And then also I've got the outside border highlighted too, because if you get out of the out-of-body experience in lucid dream, a lot of people have had what they call these God experiences, Satori, Nirvana, whatever you want to call it. It's a state of being where the ego is completely destroyed. You have no awareness of an ego. Your ego does not exist. You are all consciousness, all awareness. You are God. You are everything. You have all the answers, whatever. This is what some people experience. And basically that realm is there as well. And there's probably a whole nother talk there. Okay. So the next slide basically, remember a couple slides ago I said that there aren't any hard, fast lines between the states. So this state shows that the lines aren't very solid, right? We've got some bleed through. So if you're in a lucid dream, and Robert Wagner noticed this a lot, he'd be in the middle of a lucid dream, and it would be a completely lucid dream, but he would have things happen that seem to have some measure of reality. So there's some kind of a crossover between reality and the subjective and the objective. And he would do interesting experiments. He'd be in the middle of a dream, a lucid dream, for example, and he would say, well, all thought forms need to disappear now. And he would give this command, and half his lucid world would disappear, and he'd be in a room crowded with people, and pretty soon there's only two people left because they were the only quote unquote real ones or whatever. And so anyway, it kind of messes with your mind. But in some of the cases that Robert Wagner described, he described some lucid dreams, quote unquote, where he had a high level of objectivity, and they were collaborated with other people, other lucid dreamers were sharing the experience, whatever. And I would have to believe that he was actually having an out-of-body experience, at least in some regard, in those cases. Maybe he didn't realize it. Okay, so how can you tell the difference? A lot of people ask me, I remember the slide earlier, X, Y, and Z happened. What was happening? Was it lucid dream? Was it OBE? How can you tell the difference? OBE author Frederick Ardema, in his book Explorations in Consciousness, which is a fantastic book, by the way, he describes having experiences. For example, he would wipe his visual field. He'd say, things aren't right, and he'd swipe his hand in front of his visual field to try and clear away the weird things that are happening, and a lot of times it worked. Robert Wagner, as I said all thought forms must now disappear. He would give commands to the dream to change it, unless they are expected into being. So your unconscious, subconscious expectations can also bring things into existence. If you believe in your heart that something's going to be there, that's a subconscious belief. It's going to also influence what you experience. And then the ability to control the environment is another big factor. So if you're in an experience and you're not sure if it's a lucid dream or an out-of-body, you can try and change your environment. Say, okay, I should be able to make a hole disappear here, or I should be able to change this man into a woman. I should be able to do whatever. Try and manipulate your reality. If it manipulates pretty easily, chances are it's a lucid dream. If it doesn't, chances are it's an out-of-body. And again, I'm going back to the eyesight issue. How's your eyesight? Is your eyesight crystal clear? You're seeing every detail? Chances are it's a lucid dream. If there are clouds and strange shapes or whatever floating around, things are kind of gray or whatever, things are anomalous, then chances are it's an out-of-body experience. And lastly, can you be bored? So, can you stand around and look at maybe it's an out-of-body experience. If it has to keep going, if there's constant movement, then chances are it's a lucid dream. And the next question becomes, how do you transition from a lucid dream? If you find yourself in a lucid dream, can you get to the other side of that oval? Can you transition to an out-of-body experience? And the answer is yes, but it can be tricky. What you have to do is you have to dispel the illusion of the dream, and it's you got to use an active will. And it's difficult because it's like learning to wake up without reanimating your body. And so it gets to be a little bit tricky. You have to be able to go from that dream hallucination, get out of the hallucination, break out of that spell, and get to the out-of-body state. Once you're out of body, you will typically find that you're floating above it, as I said, 3-4 inches above the body. Then you can escape from it or whatever. But the first part is you have to break that dream apart and get rid of it. Okay, I wanted to talk just for a few minutes about psychological memory barriers. In 2011, an author by the name of Charles B. Brenner posted an article in Scientific American, December 13th, 2001. And that just recently came up again. People were recently talking about it. But basically, psychiatrists and psychologists did some studies with memory. And basically, they studied a very peculiar phenomenon that is known to many people. You walk from your office to the kitchen, and suddenly you can't remember, why did I come in here? Right? Why did I get in this? Why did I go to the kitchen? I forget what I was going to do. Or vice versa. You leave the kitchen, go to the office. Well, now I remember I was going to do something, but I can't remember why. Well, they did some psychology experiments, and what they determined is that it's another trick of your brain, right? It's like the same compartmentalizing that your brain automatically does. It turns out that when you pass from one doorway to a next, you are psychologically making a transition from one room to the next. Your brain basically likes to discard a bunch of memories at that point, short-term memories. You're in a room, you're collecting short-term memories. You leave the room, a bunch of that's ditched so that your brain can process it and put it in a compartment. And so going through doorways actually causes us to drop memories, and it's a well-known phenomenon now that psychologists are studying. Well, the same thing happens with the psychological barrier between sleeping and waking. When you go to sleep at night, you are programmed from prior experience. When I'm going to go to sleep, I'm going to drop the cares of the world. I'm going to forget what's happening. I'm going to become unconscious. And most people wake up with the same attitude. They wake and automatically they drop their cares of the world. They forget what was happening in the dream world or what they were just dreaming. And they automatically come back and their whole focus is the physical world. So there's a psychological doorway there that's very much the same thing. And we have to use special training. We have to train our bodies, train our physical brains, train our minds to retain that information. So you can do exercises such as keeping a dream journal. This is a well-known thing that lucid dreamers do. When you wake up in the morning, before you get up, before you wake up, before you even open your eyes if possible, go through what you were just dreaming. Run it over through your head, write it down, blah, blah, blah. It doesn't matter what you were doing. It doesn't matter what the dream was. None of it matters. The only thing that matters is that it tells your subconscious to retain more awareness when you're lying there and your body is asleep. And that's good for both out-of-body experiences and for lucid dreaming, right? You keep your body accustomed to not automatically purging, getting rid of all of those memories, all of those experiences that happened on the other side of dreaming or on the other side of sleep, the lucid dreaming, the out-of-body experience, whatever. So what we're really doing here is we're adjusting our subconscious filters. The next thing that I want to talk about is what happens when we fall asleep. As I said, I've spent countless hours just examining exactly what happens here, and most people don't get past, the 5 minutes or 2 minutes. And it depends on the person. It varies from person to person. My wife, Kathy, over there, was notorious for going to sleep very quickly. Matter of fact, she could fall asleep mid-sentence. And it was a sound sleep. I mean, boom, she would be out like a light. And me, on the other hand, I've spent 30 years of prolonging that transition between waking and sleeping. And so I've been able to study that. And that's good and that's bad. It's good because I can retain a lot of these memories and study what's going on. But it's bad because, it'll sometimes take me an hour or 45 minutes to get to sleep. So what happens when we fall asleep? First of all, our mind begins to wander. As you go deeper, and this is usually the last thing people remember, is their mind beginning to wander. As you go deeper into sleep, what happens is you get hypnagogic images that start to appear. You start to see things in front of your eyes. And it's not just visual hallucinations, it's also audible. You start to hear things, and it doesn't make sense. You'll hear a man's voice in mid-sentence saying 4 or 5 words. You'll hear, you'll see a triangle float by, you'll see a car in a ditch, whatever, and these images will just start floating by. And then what happens after that is after the images straighten out, sleep paralysis sets in. And this is where a lot of people start to hear the vibrations that people talk about in out-of-body experience. And then what happens after that is that you're lying there, and most people are out cold, but your subconscious, your higher self, your oversoul, whatever you want to call it, it's another part of you. It is sitting there patiently, and it's saying, "Is he asleep yet? No. Is he asleep yet? No. Is he asleep?" And then at some point it decides, yeah, he's out. He's out cold. It's safe now, and you're yanked out of your body. And a lot of times what will happen is it's almost like you're underwater. It's like if I were underwater and I was plucking a balloon, and that balloon just floats to the surface and very rapidly, boom. And so a lot of times people experience this sudden movement and it jars them. A lot of times what happens is it'll seem as if you are falling, right? You're lying there and all of a sudden, boom, like a trap door opens up underneath you. You start falling like out of control, and you wake up and you realize what was happening. But anyhow, your subconscious will yank you out of your body. If you're aware, then you can tell that this is happening. If you're not aware, and that's the job of the subconscious guardian, is to make sure you're not aware that it's happening. However, if you're quiet enough, if you can keep your mind completely still, you can fool your own subconscious, higher self, whatever you want to call it, into believing that you're asleep, that you have to make your mind completely, totally zero, no thoughts, no actions, an observer. You're just an observer. You're just watching in front of your closed eyelids, and then you can watch what's happening. If your subconscious yanks you out of your body, then you can wrestle control out of it and have an OBE. That's one method. Okay, if not, if you don't have an OBE, if you don't somehow assert yourself and gain control, what happens is that the subconscious will build your dream hallucination. And what happens is a screen appears in front of you, the scenery is made, the backdrop is made, all the characters are placed in it carefully. It's like watching somebody paint in very rapid motion, and you can witness this happening. And then the last part is that your experience is drawn into that hallucination, and you begin dreaming that way. Okay, so what makes me so sure? Well, as I said, I've spent countless hours watching what happens, and I've witnessed the creation of dreams firsthand. I've spent hours laying there watching this happen, watching dream hallucinations be built, and I've torn them down. I've watched this subconscious guardian and been aware of its decision that I'm out cold and that it's safe to take me out of body now because I'm not aware of it anymore. I've also witnessed firsthand a phenomenon that most people have heard of called deja vu. And I can tell you exactly what deja vu is. Deja vu is when you remember dream planning. What happens is in your sleep, people spend hours and hours and hours planning the future. And I've seen it firsthand. You go through a scene in your life that hasn't happened yet. You play that dream out. It's like you have a movie projector, and you say, okay, I'm in here. I want this door to open. I want somebody to enter. No, it didn't happen quite right. Let's do it over. And let's do that over and over and over until you get a physical experience that you've planned out perfectly. And we plan out our lives perfectly. And then when that experience actually happens, you remember that dream. Okay, I was this, and you get this strange feeling. This has happened before. I don't know where, I don't know why, I don't know when, but it's happened to me before. I've been here. I know this has happened before. That is deja vu, and what it is it's dream planning. And I've seen it happen because I've watched myself doing it. I've also witnessed awareness during sleep paralysis. This is another phenomenon that people wake up, and they're mostly happens in the morning when they're waking up. And what happens is your body has a natural mechanism called sleep paralysis. Everyone's body does it. Its purpose is to immobilize your body so that you don't act out your dreams. If you were to act out your dreams, you'd go off walking into the freeway or whatever, and you'd kill yourself. And so over millions of years of evolution, your body has adapted, and it has learned how to immobilize you while you're having these dream experiences. And so a lot of people, what's happening in ASP is that some people, their awareness wakes up before their body wakes up. Their mind becomes awake before their sleep paralysis wears off. And it is possible to change an ASP experience into an out-of-body experience. And I've done it many times. And I've got it documented on my website. There's an article called OBEs, or called What Every Person Should Know About ASP and Sleep Paralysis or something like that. Look it up on my website. It's if this has ever happened to you. And usually when ASP hits, people are scared because they don't know what's happening. They only know they can't move, and they're paralyzed. And because they're paralyzed, they become afraid. And because they are so close to the dream state, their their thoughts, their fears automatically become manifest. And so they see bad things. They see evil creatures. They'll see a demon coming to get them. They'll see old hags coming to sit on them. They'll see tormentors. They'll see demons. And I believe a lot of this stuff has carried over into our modern religions. And these are, the religions that talk about hell or hellish environments, whatever. A lot of this is the leftover from these kind of experiences. And as I said, I've dissolved lucid dreams and dissolved the hallucination to find myself floating above my body, and then I leave my body and do whatever I want in the OBE. And I've also had another experience that's pretty rare, and that is an OBE with a completely conscious exit and return with no breaks of awareness. This is very rare. Sometimes it's very common for me to leave my body and I'll be aware of either the exit or the return. But when you are completely aware from start to finish of the entire experience, it's pretty dramatic. It gives you a very good understanding of what all's happening and what the mechanics are. So the next question is, okay, what actually leaves the body? Parapsychologist Susan Blackmore said, who says you're actually in the body anyway? You're probably not really in your body. So really what is your focus, is your awareness. It's the filter through which you operate. You are designed and accustomed to operating through your physical body, and when you move that's when it becomes an out-of-body experience. It's not that you are ingrained in your body, it's that it's just the filter that you're looking through the world. And so really, all of this talk about an astral body, I believe, has more to do with an ingrained body image. Olaf Blank and Michael Peterson, in their experiments, they did a lot of fun things like psychology experiments where they would use a mirror to get a person to identify with a fake rubber hand, and when they, poked it with a knife or whatever, the person would experience sensation because they were able to trick their body or their brain into moving its center of body image. They were altering the body image of a person. And Fred Ardema, I mentioned him earlier in his book Explorations in Consciousness. He has some very good talk about experiments he did. He did out-of-body experiments where he would take blocks of wood and he would nail like 2 nails in one block and 3 nails in another, 4 blocks in another, and then he would have his wife hide the blocks in a specific area, and then he would travel out of body and try to figure out which block was which. Well, he had a miserable time. But he goes into some fascinating discussion about what our body image is and how it relates to the out-of-body experience, and I do highly recommend that. And lastly, I wanted to mention Michael Grasso. He is a PhD philosopher. He has several books, actually. One of them is called Frontiers of the Soul, Exploring Psychic Evolution. And he came up with a unique idea. He said, well, what if, a lot of the old occult literature basically said, you've got an astral body, you're coming down, you're a soul having a physical experience. And you're here in this lifetime learning things, whatever. But what if conventional wisdom should be turned around? What if instead you are a physical body and the physical body has been going through millions of years of evolution? What if your physical body, the physical bodies of humankind, are starting to evolve a soul? So this is the idea that maybe, couple 100,000 years ago, whatever, people were just physical, and now that our brains are more evolved, we're becoming more spiritual, whatever, maybe we are evolving a non-physical counterpart as an extension of our physical awareness. Maybe our physical bodies are suddenly creating these souls so that we can live longer than our physical body. Some fascinating talk there, not that I agree with it, but it is some good conjecture anyway. Okay, and that leads us to the discussion of what are we really? And what I believe we are is concentric rings of awareness. And everyone's familiar with this thing you're using right now, and that's the ego. Psychologists have known about it forever. Not forever, but since Sigmund Freud. But we're also the subconscious. We're also beyond the subconscious. There is a superconscious, this watcher that keeps track of things. I think when you expand your awareness out, if there are higher and higher selves, this is all conjecture. I'm not physically. I've experienced the subconscious and some of these other selves, but I'm conjecturing now that there are further and further levels the deeper you go, and at some point they intersect with one another. So it's if you go to the highest self, you talk about your higher self. If there is to be said a highest self, that would be what I would call God, the place where all human souls, all souls of all beings intersect as one consciousness, one awareness. And Robert Waggoner, in his book Lucid Dreaming, Gateway to the Mind, he has a excellent wording. I like the way he said this. He calls us, what are we? And he had just described an experience in which he transcended space-time, whatever. He had one of these God experiences, and he described us as a singular awareness clothed with layers of self-conceptions. And I think that is just perfect. That is the best way to describe it. Okay, so things to consider. I'm still learning. We're all still learning. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here. Earth is a learning experience. Any conclusions that we come to regarding our out-of-body experiences and lucid dreams must adapt to fit the evidence. We can't be like scientists and change the evidence to fit our theories. Unlike science and religion, we need to have open minds. Too often, science has just as closed mind as religion, right? Science, some people call science a religion because, boy, you step on their toes, you try and shoot any of their theories down, and they're just as defensive of their theories as somebody, you try and contradict something that's in the Bible. Boy, you get your head bit off. That's where people, that's where you get into deep trouble with people, is when you start messing with their reality systems and their belief systems and their religions. But science is no better. And so more scientific study is definitely needed on out-of-body experience and lucid dreaming. I believe that we need more people, more dedicated scientists like Charles Tart, who did the experiments on Robert Monroe and Miss Z and others. We need more scientists like Dean Radin, who is one of my favorite books of all time, is a Dean Radin book, where he does some analysis of different experiments that have been done in transcending space-time, telepathy, all of these different things, parapsychology things. And scientists like Rupert Sheldrake. These men are, and I'm hoping there are women in there too in that list, but I don't know too many of these scientists. There are so few of them, it's the trouble. We need to have more of them. But these are the kind of scientists, both men and women, who are willing to put their reputations and their lives on the line, go out on a limb, do the experiments, do the hard science, and say, okay, take a step back. Let's examine what is actually happening here. Let's do some experiments, and let's come to some conclusions, and let's find out what's really happening. The trouble is, I've been approached by a lot of people. A lot of people will come to me. This has happened, I don't know how many hundreds of times. Somebody will come to me and say, oh, if you can go out of body, huh? Well, I tell you what, fly to my bedroom. I'm going to put an object in the upper drawer right by my bed, my bedside table. I'm going to put an object there. You fly to my body and tell me what it is. Okay, well, I did that a few times, and they're like, oh, cool, you were able to do it, But what does it prove? It proves absolutely nothing, because it's not scientifically done. You go and you try to prove something to one person, so what? The key to science is in repeatability and scientific experiments. So we need to have more scientists involved. And not only that, all the scientists in the world won't make a difference without the experiencers themselves. So we need more experiencers, or we need more instructors like William Buhlman, who are willing to teach out-of-body techniques at the Monroe Institute. People like the IAC who are out there trying to help people achieve out-of-body experience so that when people become proficient, this can be studied better. And we need you too. So interest in out-of-body experience and lucid dreamings has grown enormously in the last few years. When I first got into this subject in 1980s, there were very few books on the subject. And now you can see from my library, there's 150 books or more. And there are lots of people now. Last I counted, there were probably a dozen different out-of-body experience and lucid dreaming type groups, special interest groups in Facebook. And the interest is growing and growing. And that's good to see. As I said, out-of-body experiences are hard to produce in the lab anywhere, and that's why we need more people who can produce them on demand. Okay, so any scientific models that we come up with to explain out-of-body experience also have to take into account the other related phenomena, those studied by Gabbard and Twemlow, for example, autoscopy, which is like doppelganger phenomenon where you see an image of yourself. Schizophrenia, where you have a double life, dissociative identity disorder, multiple personality, where two or more identities can supposedly assume the same body with different personalities, and other body boundary experiences. They also have to take into account mystical and religious experiences as well. So the next question, how do you get started with OBEs? First thing is to read everything you can about it. You have to engage your subconscious, and one way I like to do that is to read these OBE books. There's lots of good information on the web. You can read my first book. It's available for free on the internet, or I've got some copies. It was just released in a second edition on the back wall that I'll be signing afterward. Also, my website, robertpeterson.org. I've got a lot of information there for free. Including on my website, I've got a pointer to my blog. I've got a blog that I try and update about once a month. And on my blog, one of the things I do is OBE book reviews. And so I've got probably a list of 13 or 14 out-of-body and lucid dream books that I've reviewed. And I tell you my honest opinions of what the good, the bad, and the ugly is in each of them, in my opinions. And I've only come across a few that I absolutely didn't like. A lot of them are good for various other reasons, but none of them cover any none of them do it the phenomenon justice. There's a lot to be studied out there. So anyway, my blog is available on my website, has a pointer to the blog. The blog has pointers to the book reviews. And of course, the Facebook groups that I talked about have videos, suggestions, and people you can just ask them for advice. Another thing you can do is start reading OBE books. Robert Monroe's books are good. William Buhlman's books, Robert Bruce's book, Frederick Ardema I've mentioned. Michael Raduga, he's got a good book, and it's also available for free on the internet. He's got some interesting ideas. Graham Nichols, he's in the UK. He teaches some classes and has a couple books. And then there's Muldoon and Carrington's books, and of course my books too. A lot of information out there now, and so just go out and get it and practice. You got to try things. If one method doesn't work, try another. I get a lot of people who come to me and they say, I've been trying this method for a year and a half and it just doesn't work. Well, gee, try a different method. If it's not working, if you're not making progress, switch strategies, right? Because everyone's brain is different. Everyone's got different training. Everyone's got different psychology. Try different things till you stumble on something that worked. That's what happened to me. I tried Robert Monroe's method and it worked first. Then it wouldn't work from that point on. I had to keep researching different things and trying different things until I hit upon one that worked for me. There are also a bunch of classes William Buellman, or Bill as he's known, does regular classes on out-of-body experience at the Monroe Institute, which was founded by Robert Monroe in Virginia, outside of Charlottesville, I believe. There's the International Academy of Consciousness that I mentioned earlier. They have classes. They were founded on the principles of Waldo Vieira, who lives in Iguazu Falls, Brazil. And he's got a bunch of people who are following, and they've opened several different institutes, and their whole mission is to teach out-of-body travel. They've got classes they teach in Los Angeles, I think in Portugal, South America, and I think here in Austin somebody said there was one as well. I don't know where they all are. If you're in the UK, Graham Nichols does teach classes there, and I believe those would be good classes. Todd Akamesis, he teaches classes too. He's a very entertaining guy, has some real interesting stories. And Robert Bruce in Australia, he teaches classes, and I believe one of the people here does the phone-in thing. Somebody in the audience here does a phone-in thing where they're going through a Robert Bruce class. Lastly, visualize it. Program your subconscious. As Sylvan Muldoon once said, the key, the number one, the first law of out-of-body experience is if you can convince your subconscious to bring you out of body, you'll go out of body, because it's that guardian you're trying to influence. You're trying to tell it, don't just switch off, I want to retain consciousness. So you have to program your subconscious. You got to visualize being out of body, look back and say, is that what I really want? And then say to yourself, yes, I really want to have an out of body. So it's reinforcing to your subconscious that, yes, this is going to be a good thing. Yes, this will work out okay, blah, blah, blah. And practice constantly, never give up. The key to out of body experience is tenacity. And I'm known for my tenacity. I didn't give up after one experience or after I learned it was hard. I kept at it and I kept at it and kept at it until I figured out what works. And that's really what you got to do. And lastly, I've got a slide here I got off the internet. One does not simply astral project overnight. And practice, practice, practice. Does anyone remember the original thing? This is from Lord of the Rings. And the original quote, I think, is, one does not simply walk into Mordor. But anyway, somebody posted this. I thought it was funny. And lastly, contact information. Feel free to contact me. I'm available on the internet. There's my email address, my website, my blog. And unlike a lot of hotty-totty authors or whatever, big shots, gurus, I don't charge for advice. I'm not out there to sell a book. Otherwise, I wouldn't put my book on the internet for free like I did. I put it out there to prove that I'm not in it for the money. And unlike a lot of authors, I will answer questions. I know I read everybody's email, and I've gotten thousands of emails over the years. I don't always get the time to respond promptly, but I do try and return all the emails. I'm not always 100%, but I try, and it depends on the content. General rule, if you have a quick question, if it's a small paragraph, I'll read it, I'll respond, I'll give you pages of information if you want, because I love this stuff. If it's a 3-page discourse about this happened and this happened and this happened, I may not have time to read it for quite a while, and I may be slow in responding. So anyway, thank you all for coming and listening to me babble. Thank you for paying attention, and I hope that you all get involved in out-of-body experience, and if not that, then lucid dreaming, because I do believe that both have a lot to teach us, and there's a lot to be learned, a lot to be studied, and a lot more out there. So thank you very much.
Any questions?
Great talk.
Thanks.
Did you ever have trouble getting back to your body? Or were you ever scared at one point, like you won't be able to get back in?
Actually, no, I haven't had an experience where I've been scared to get back in. Now, I do remember one experience reading about it. Robert Monroe had an experience where he was flying along, and all of a sudden he hit a wall, boom, and it was like he couldn't figure out how to get. He thought he was returning to his body, and he apparently hit some kind of wall, and he couldn't figure out how to get around it. He went up, he went down, he went sideways as far as he could, both directions, couldn't get back in, and he was there. He said it seemed like hours, and finally he gave up in despair or whatever. But eventually he came out of it. And it seemed, I think he said that he started flying the other direction or whatever, and eventually he landed back in. And his theory was that he got turned around and maybe he was trying to go out too far. Instead, he thought he was leaving or returning to the body, and instead he was going the other direction or something. But no, that's not happened to me. But there are helpers out there. A lot of times, if you ask for assistance, you will get it. And a lot of times, the assistance that you get are from apparently some kind of helpers. They're almost always invisible. I don't know why they're invisible, but a lot of times I'll get stuck or something will happen, and I'll say, well, can I get some assistance here or whatever? Can I get some help? And I'll just hear some, like a male voice saying, well, try this or whatever. And I'll get some suggestions, and it's almost like there are helpers out there that are watching over you and that will assist you with different things. I don't know why they're invisible, but what I do know, it could be that my vibrations are low because I'm more based in the physical world, and their vibrations are higher because they're more astral or whatever you want to call it. They're in that other world. And if you read some of the literature by the people of the IAC, the International Academy of Consciousness, they talk about helpers being invisible as well. So that matches with my experience as well. But yeah, I can believe that.
What technique has worked for you, and maybe some comments about techniques that hadn't worked for you?
The technique that works most effectively for me to induce out-of-body experience is the one that I described in chapter 24 of my book, and it has several steps. But I've also got, on my website, I've got a class called OBE Class Notes. It's an article out there where I describe all these different things. So there's different factors, right? I can't tell you any one thing that's going to get you out of your body because there are so many factors to bear in mind. For example, a lot of people make rookie mistakes. If you try and leave your body right before bed, that's a typical mistake because you are subconsciously programmed to fall asleep in your bed at that location at that time and automatically, boom, out like a light. So the best time to try out of body is in the morning when you're refreshed. Your physical brain has higher levels of DHEA, which is a chemical that has to do with awareness. And at the same time, your body still has enough melatonin left over so that your body can be immobilized and go into that sleep paralysis. So the best time to try it is in the morning when you're refreshed, after you've had a good night's sleep. And then use this method that I described in chapter 24. And again, it's available on my website. My entire first book is available for free. But basically, what it boils down to is you have to relax your body completely, 100%. Once you're there and your body is so relaxed that you can't feel it, you start getting the hypnagogic imagery, right? And you start going into this watcher mode. Now, while you're doing that, you have to imagine yourself as floating. So imagine that you just use your imagination, pretend you're floating. And then when you see these images, take control of the hypnagogic image, start twirling it around in circles. Okay, what I like to use is an octahedron, which is basically like two pyramids back to back. And I like to spin that object, and the spinning makes it more solid. It's really hard to visualize something that's stationary. It's much easier to visualize something that's moving. So anyway, any hypnagogic image that you see in that deep level of sleep, you can take control of it. When you take control of it, you start spinning it. When you start spinning it, you start rocking. And then, so I'm visualizing the Coke bottle. I see a Coke bottle in my hypnagogic imagery. I start spinning it around to keep it stabilized. Then I start visualizing it coming forward and backward, And remember, I'm still pretending that I'm floating in my body, that I'm kind of waving back and forth. So then I imagine that there's a gravity between me and the object. So as the object pulls closer, there's a gravity that pulls me closer to it. And as it goes further away, I'm further away. So I develop a swinging motion like this, right? Back and forth, while it's spinning. And then eventually that spinning becomes very big. So it's, way out here and way in here. And when it gets close, you grab onto it mentally, and then you let that momentum of the body swinging back out pull you straight out. And what happens then is it doesn't really pull you out. What happens is it dislodges you from the physical, and then you find the vibrations sweep in. The vibrations sweep in, and then you have to dislodge yourself from that physical body, from that location, by either standing up, sitting up, whatever. And one common question is, a lot of people say, well, I can get to the vibrations, but I can't stand up or whatever, So you have to stand up. If you physically try to stand up, if you're doing it right, your astral body will stand up. If you are doing it wrong, your physical body will move. If you've really got the true out-of-body vibrations, your body won't move. It'll be paralyzed, and your astral body will go, if you want to call it that. So did I answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
Yep.
What do you think some of the benefits are of doing OBE? And also, do you think by doing remote viewing, is that done via OBE?
No, remote viewing is something completely different. In remote viewing, you're physically in your body. Excuse me. But what in remote viewing, you're seeing a distant location. So, for example, veteran remote viewer Joe McMonigal would see a bridge or whatever, but he was physically in his body. He would describe what's happening. He was in control of that physical body. And OBEs, as I described them, your physical body is just another inanimate object in the room. As for the benefits involved with the out-of-body experience, they're innumerable. I've got one of my blog article in my blog. I talked about the benefits. What good are they? A lot of people ask me, well, what good are they? What purpose? What good is it if you go out of your body? What do you do? Fly around? It seems really pretty useless. But really, there are enormous benefits, because not only psychologically, because you can prove to yourself that there's an afterlife, reducing your fear of death, but there are also practical uses, right? Finding missing children. I know that veteran OBE Marilyn Hughes started a foundation, and one of the things that they set as a goal was to find missing children. So people would have Amber Alerts, whatever, and she had a kind of a team of out-of-body people who would try to go find this missing child and that kind of thing. There's also police work, trying to solve crimes or whatever. You could even reduce the crime rate if the government had a fleet or a team of out-of-body people who could for sure nail you for doing a crime. There'd be a heck of a lot less crime, wouldn't there? Because you knew you'd be caught. Okay, you hid the money, here or whatever. You hid the evidence, whatever. This team of out-of-body people could go figure that out. So there's a lot of potential out there, and it has yet to be realized. But definitely read the blog article, because I lay it out pretty nicely there.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so you talked about at the beginning about people from the Monroe Institute and how they have the experience of, being able to verbalize what it is that they're experiencing while they're in this out-of-body state, which you don't agree is an out-of-body experience, correct?
Well, they call them out-of-body experiences, but that's not how I define out-of-body experience. When I can only describe what's happened to me.
Right.
When I have an out-of-body experience, my body is in sleep paralysis. My body cannot move, with the possible exception of when I said I think I might have opened my eyes several times. I see your bedroom ceiling, whatever. It's all blurry or whatever because your body hasn't blinked or whatever. But other than that, your body is completely immobilized, or at least in my experience. So when I talk about, when I read books like Rosalind McKnight's or Bruce Moen's books, and they're describing going into focus level this and focus level that, what I believe is happening to them is that they are still, there's a level of awareness that's still in their body, and maybe it's just a matter of how adept you are at it, because there are people like, for example, Tom Campbell and his My Big Toe or whatever. He was one of the early people who worked with Robert Monroe and the Institute. And maybe maybe those guys are just so adept that they've learned to control their body during the experience. But I believe that they're seeing and hearing and possibly even touching things that are not part of their body awareness, and yet they're somehow still able to control their body. But that doesn't fit well with how I define my out-of-body experiences. Thank you.
Great presentation, very comprehensive.
Thank you very much.